All Hallows Eve, that time of year again when all creatures of the night are unleashed to the world. It's time to return to where it all started. Another year, but the scares continue. Another month, but the fear proceeds to rise. This is the Venom month of horrors 2, Trapped in Time.
Well, part 3 couldn't have ruined this franchise any more than it already did, so I guess we gotta salvage this shit now.
I don't want to.
Well, they gave it a go and tried to turn the series into an anthology saga, but it didn't quite work, so executive producer Mustafa Akkad decided, hey, maybe we should have put Michael Myers in the Michael Myers movie, considering the main complaint for the third one was, where the fuck is Michael Myers? My main complaint for the third one was, what the fuck is this? Thanks. Cannon Films had just finished work on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and they actually approached John Carpenter and Deborah Hill to come back one more time for Halloween 4. Deborah would have produced, and Carpenter, along with Dennis Etchison, would pen the script, with Joe Dante in mind for the director's chair. However, this script from Etchison was rejected, being called too cerebral, and they wanted Myers to be more of a flesh and blood killer. Carpenter's script treatment was also rejected, as he wanted to take it in a more ghostly psychological direction. It would have focused on Haddonfield recovering from the events of the first 2 films, and how the citizens were dealing with what happened, but the producers instead wanted to go back to a standard slasher flick. At this point, Carpenter and Hill actually sold the Halloween rights entirely to Akkad and left the project. The directing job was then given to Dwight H. Little, who had only really had experience directing episodes of Freddy's Nightmares, ironically, and the movie Getting Even.
No way.
On February the 25th, 1988, Alan B. McElroy was brought in to write a new script, but on March the 7th, the writer's strike began, leading to him being forced to think up a story, pitch it, and finish the entire screenplay in just 11 days. The character of Laurie's daughter was going to be introduced, originally named Britty, though it was later changed to Jamie as an homage to Jamie Lee Curtis.
Why?
Interestingly, Little wanted to portray Myers as a genuine escaped mental patient, and not a supernatural figure. His interpretation was to have Michael pursue Jamie as a way to try to connect with her, but he would have absolutely no social capacity to actually interact with the girl, so he would end up resorting to violence. A genuine escaped mental patient with no supernatural elements. So about this psychic connection, Dwight. Yeah, it's weird that part 5 gets all of the criticism for giving Michael and Jamie a psychic connection, but it's clearly established here. Not only does Jamie have nightmares of Michael before she even knows what he looks like, not only does Michael somehow know what Jamie looks like and where she lives, which you could argue is just sloppy writing. I mean, in the original script, Michael was basically going to stalk them around Haddonfield and listen to their conversations, much like in the original film, and this is how he would learn that Jamie is Laurie's daughter. But it's all cut out, so he just so happens to bump into them at the costume store by chance. She literally has a vision of him in the ambulance before a massacre, and then Jamie turns into a murderer at the end because of Myers' influence. This film literally establishes a psychic connection, but Michael isn't supernatural. Weirdly, in the original script, the ambulance appeared only after Jamie looked away, so the audience would have seen it, but not her. This was changed in editing, but it looks like she's clearly looking at it. So therefore, the psychic connection was there right away, guys. Don't blame 5 for this.
Stop it, okay?
Donald Pleasance is the only actor to have come back from the original 2, though he was hesitant until he read the finished script. Jamie Lee Curtis was also asked to reprise her role as Laurie, but the inconsiderate bitch had become a big star since the first 2 movies, and she turned it down.
I just got pissed off, that's all.
For the role of her daughter Jamie, Melissa Joan Hart auditioned and actually nearly got the part. Yeah, that would have been a very different episode of Clarissa Explains It All.
So?
She lost out to Danielle Harris, who had impressed in One Life to Live. Her foster sister Rachel was offered to Rebecca Schaefer, though she had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts, which is when it went to House of the Dead icon Ellie Cornell after her failed audition in A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, The Dream Master.
That's impossible.
Filming began on April the 11th, 1988 in Pasadena, California and Salt Lake City, Utah, forcing the producers to import leaves and squash to create the Halloween aesthetic for the film. Dwight Little wanted to capture the charm of the original movie, but also test himself and take new risks. risks. He wanted to walk a fine line between horror and mystery, and not just have it be a mindless gore fest. The cast and crew all looked out for Danielle Harris, and they always made sure she wasn't too scared from the experience. George P. Wilbur in particular, who played Myers, often removed his mask to reassure her that none of it was real and that he wasn't really going to hurt her.
You don't know that.
More issues arose when Garland Wild, who worked behind the scenes, became injured during a scene in which Myers fights a potential love interest. He was putting up a light at the time when he fell and ended up with his wrists being slit and had to be rushed to hospital. In another scene in which Myers chases the girls on a rooftop, Ellie Cornell accidentally cut her stomach open on a large nail and lost a huge amount of blood, but continued like a trooper to finish the scene anyway. Speaking of which, this scene was originally a lot different. The house was going to catch fire, killing the lead cop character, which is why the girls had to flee to the rooftop in the first place. But it was deemed far too expensive and was trimmed down. And I don't know why, but Michael goddamn Myers casually walking over a rooftop, and you can tell desperately trying not to slip on his ass, is pretty funny. There was also going to be a scene where Myers stalks Jamie in the school and begins flipping tables over to try to find her. But this was scrapped and used in another installment years down the line instead. There was also another scene that was actually shot in which we see a flashback to the aftermath of the events of Halloween 2, where paramedics extinguished the burning Michael Myers, despite Loomis pleading them otherwise, but it was cut out of the final film. Rachel also has a friend called Lindsay, who's barely in the movie, but this was actually the little girl Lindsay from the original film who was supposed to have a much bigger part, while another guy who hangs out with them was also supposed to be a grown-up Tommy Doyle, but this was dropped, though Tommy would return later to the franchise. Twice! Another abandoned idea was to focus solely on Tommy and Lindsay in therapy after the events of the first two films, before Michael returns. The idea they ended up going with, however, was taking place 10 years after the events of Halloween 2. Thankfully, Halloween 3 never existed.
Why now?
Michael has been in a coma this entire time, but Loomis hasn't. They make a great deal about it too.
Even if by some miracle Michael is conscious, his muscles will be totally useless.
You're talking about him as if he were a human being.
But nobody questions how Loomis, who started the damn fire and is an old man, is still kicking it about the place. He's just got a few bumps and scratches on him.
Take a good look.
Is Loomis Superman? The thing is, there was an idea to show a flashback to reveal that he was actually blasted out of the hospital to explain how he survived. But it doesn't make it into the final film, so it just doesn't make any sense.
What are you, deaf?
And what a shock, he wakes up and begins hunting down his niece Jamie and
Anybody who gets in his way.
Donald Pleasance also struggled as the nighttime scenes were so cold he had to wear a hat in a lot of them, leading to over 6 hours worth of footage having to be reshot entirely. The producers were also adamant on reusing the same mask as the original film, but unfortunately it was now long gone, so a brand new one had to be bought from a costume shop. But after some test footage was filmed, they weren't a fan of how it looked, so they customised it. But again, they didn't think it lived up to the original. At this point, they decided it was too old and they needed another new one. So a bunch of scenes had to be reshot again with the new mask. Unfortunately, there is a shot that remains in the film with the old mask, and it's clearly noticeable. It looks ridiculous. Ben Tramer, is that you? Little claimed that it was due to an end-of-the-day error when a tired crew member accidentally grabbed the wrong mask and nobody on set noticed. And by the time they got to the edit, they didn't have the time or the money to fix it.
This is no joke.
When the movie's rough cut was finished, Dwight and Akkad were unhappy with it and felt the violence was far too soft. So more reshoots had to be done to add to the gore to the film that they didn't want to be a gore fest. Although there's a scene in which Michael murders a mechanic for his clothes, but in the original cut he was going to stab him in the throat with a crowbar. But this was cut down because it was too gory, they can't win. Although in the final film he clearly impales the man through his overalls and then steals his clothes, so shouldn't Michael's outfit have a hole and blood on? They just don't, it's weird.
You dumb son of a bitch.
Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers was released on October the 21st, 1988 and smashed its way into number 1 at the box office in its opening weekend with $6.8 million, later reaching a worldwide total of $17.7 million, becoming the 6th highest grossing movie in the entire franchise. But despite its current cult status, upon release, Halloween 4 was actually slammed. Despite them finally bringing Michael Myers back, it was criticised for resorting to cheap visceral scares and gore to turn Michael into a supernatural force, and that it lacked the depth and creativity of the original film. Others called the plot convoluted and sloppy, though over time Halloween 4 began to gain a lot more appreciation, and it's now widely considered to be one of the better installments in the franchise.
Okay. Great.
I do love how they really think leather straps are going to secure the guy who survived bullets in the eyes, several bullets in the abdomen, a damn explosion and fire, and was able to walk through doors unfazed. Then again, later on they use a wooden chair leaning against a door to stop him, so who knows?
A decade ago, Halloween night, he murdered 16 people, maybe more.
I am a security officer from the exposition department.
But his doctor, of all people, shot him 6 times.
I mean, are you ignoring part 2 now? Because if you're including that film, he got shot a lot more times than just 6. I also need to end this argument here. The series would end up getting rebooted and this film retconned, and the reason was to bring back Laurie, who supposedly dies off screen as Jamie Lee Curtis didn't want to come back. The problem? Show me evidence of this movie where they actually confirm that Laurie's dead. Sure, Jamie prays and mentions her parents in heaven.
God bless Mommy and Daddy in heaven.
But that's because Jamie gets bullied by other kids who say that her mum's dead.
Her mommy's dead!
So naturally, of course you would believe it. But in an exchange between Jamie and her foster sister Rachel, they do not act like people who are aware that Laurie is dead.
I know you miss your parents. It hasn't been that long.
It's been 11 months.
Who the fuck talks to a child who's just lost their parents and says, "Oh, don't worry, it's not been that long. Get over it, you little pussy." Clearly she's just disappeared. She's waiting for her to come back. Wikipedia says that she's dead. The entire internet says that she's dead. But if you watch the film, there's quite literally no actual confirmation in it. People just pulled it out of their asses. The movie definitely takes the series back to what made it great. Yes, they add gore, but it's handled well and it's not over the top. The direction is amazing, with some genuinely ominous and creepy shots. They utilise fog really well and it creates such a tense and creepy atmosphere. There's so many well-structured shots of Michael in the background, and it builds the tension so well. There's a scene where Jamie has a terrible nightmare about the Rob Zombie films.
A bad dream. That's not just a nasty old dream.
And Myers actually grabs her from underneath the bed, which is admittedly really scary. But then him sitting up next to the bed looks hilarious. I've always loved her foster father's reaction here. He gets his tie dirty, but then looks at his wife as if it's her fault and her problem to fix it, as if he isn't a grown man.
Charlene?
Danielle Harris gives an unbelievable performance as Jamie. Well, except for here.
I'm sorry I ruined everything. If I wasn't here, you can go out.
Her only bad read. But hey, at least she's not alone.
That clown costume's really cool.
You have so much sympathy for this character, and very often she doesn't even need to speak. It's a true testament to her talent that she was always reassured that it wasn't real, because she genuinely looks terrified throughout. When I met her at a convention, I did ask if Michael Myers scared her, and she confirmed that she was never once scared of the guy. Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis is amazing as always, and honestly delivers some of the best lines of the entire franchise.
We're not talking about any ordinary prisoner, Hoffman. We are talking about evil on 2 legs. 6 bodies! Sheriff! That's what I've seen between here and Richmond! A filling station in flames! I tell you, Michael Myers is here, in this town! He's here to kill that little girl and anybody who gets in his way.
How can a man do this, Loomis? Tell me.
It isn't a man.
What is he? Tell me! The hell are we dealing with?
Evil.
His delivery really sells Myers as such a deadly force, and he and Harris are definitely the highlights. But how the hell did Michael even survive the ambulance crash?
It's over, leave it alone.
They should have done that with the franchise. In the original script, he was actually going to crash a prison bus, a scene which would end up being used later on in the series. But it was then changed to an ambulance, but for some reason they still kept this line.
Michael could have been thrown from the bus.
Good to see that Michael still takes the time to prop up the bodies of his victims for some reason. But why the hell does this one gas station have so many damn photos of Abraham Lincoln, and none of them are straight or organised correctly? Loomis ends up bumping into Myers and begs him to not return to Haddonfield, but I've never understood how he misses these bullets. I mean, he's literally looking straight at him when he fires. The film doesn't overdo comedy, but it does get some laughs in there.
Fuck off, Wade.
Rachel is kind of dating this Kevin Bacon wannabe called Brady, but he is such a bellend. She has to cancel plans as she's being forced to take Jamie trick-or-treating at the last minute, and he quite literally can't wait just an extra day for a date. So he literally cheats on her. Yeah, he's that desperate to get laid, he can't wait one day. And despite being caught, he still bangs her anyway. But to his credit, he does kind of redeem himself as he protects Jamie and Rachel and fights Michael to the death by himself. He sacrifices his own life for them, so fair play.
God damn you.
Michael finding Jamie in the store is admittedly quite creepy, but how does nobody else spot the 6-foot killing machine in the William Shatner mask? More like a William Shitner mask. It looks pretty bad, I can't lie. There is a really cool scene where Loomis gets picked up by this random old guy. He only has one scene, and yet it's really interesting, and you do want to know more about this character. In the novelization, he does actually appear later, going to the police station to find Loomis and help him kill Myers. But he ends up bumping into Michael and having his eyes gouged out. But he does survive. He would have then warned Rachel and Jamie that he finally saw the true face of evil, but it was all reduced to one scene in the film, but I do kind of prefer that, as it adds to the mystery of the character.
I've been hunting the bastard for 30 years, give or take. Come close a time or two. Too damn close.
I don't get it though. Michael breaks into Jamie's house to rummage through Laurie's photos, but why? Is he being a detective now? Just have to make sure I'm after the right girl. Since when does he care who he kills? A lynch mob forms simply because the police don't answer the phone after one attempt.
Phone never just rings at a police station. No way.
How times change. But unlike so many other films that have used this cliche, there's genuine motivation behind it. The mob are outraged and don't trust the police force after they failed to protect their kids 10 years ago, and the cops have no choice but to let them help because they have nobody else to protect them.
You haven't got a police force. These men may be the only defense you've got.
The deaths are pretty good in this film, I can't lie. They go all out.
He's been here.
How do you know?
There's such a weird scene where Rachel is chased by Myers but then says,
What's going on?
"You just saw Michael Myers! What the hell do you mean what's going on?" Then we get a bunch of kids pranking the police and dressing as Michael, but what the hell do they expect was gonna happen? They nearly get shot! Oh yes, you're dressing as Michael Myers! There's a scene later where the mob accidentally murdered the wrong guy, so that was probably one of them, little idiots. There's also a fucking hilarious scene where Michael practically takes a nap in the back of a cop car. Why? Why doesn't he just kill him and steal it?
132, over.
Ben, I just heard about the station.
I hope they don't see me. How doesn't he see him? He uses it to get a lift to Jamie's house, but it makes no sense. And then he somehow opens the door to escape, even though it's a cop car, so you can't open the back door from the inside. And we're supposed to believe that Michael goddamn Myers is able to walk around this tiny ass house completely undetected. It's not even like it's a damn mansion.
What's going on?
Michael Myers.
Who's that?
How do you not know Michael Myers? It was only 10 years ago. Oh, who's this Jeffrey Dahmer fellow people are talking about? The musical score in this film is top notch and really does build the tension well. Before Michael somehow brutally murders the blonde chick and nobody hears it in this dingy ass house. Probably the wind. It is really intense as they're trapped inside. I mean, they say they're trapped inside, but then everyone's even attempts the back door.
Leave us alone!
Oh. Alright then. The final act is amazing. He stalks them in the attic, which is really intense, before finding himself a knife. Who the hell keeps a knife in the attic? Before it goes to the rooftop, and then the school! And apparently Myers decided to attack Loomis, then hide, just to appear again. But Jamie must have the same teleportation powers as her uncle, magically transforming into a much taller and older stunt double. There is a really cool moment as we get a bunch of empty shots of the school to mirror the ending to the original film, which is a nice touch. But this is where the mob shows up and I'm sorry. We later see that Michael appears on the truck, so we're to assume as they're having this conversation, Michael fucking Myers is crawling underneath their truck and hanging onto the bottom. Heh, they'll never suspect a thing. She even waits ages before doing anything too. The final fight is really thrilling, especially with the musical score. But why does it take so long for Rachel to think of slamming on the brakes?
Alors, cher monsieur.
And then we get one of the most cliche lines in movie history.
Die, you son of a bitch!
Thing is, it doesn't matter how many times it's done, I love it every single time. It just works. But after all of that, Rachel suddenly abandons Jamie all over again. The movie was originally going to end with Jamie snapping and killing Rachel, but it was changed, so she instead attacks her foster mum. It is quite suspenseful, but I think killing Rachel after establishing just how close they are throughout the entire film could have actually been a really strong ending. Or would have pissed everyone off, one of the two. And unfortunately, Donald Pleasance completely ruins this amazing ending.
No! 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 No!
I love how her foster dad barely even reacts to his daughter becoming a murderer. I just can't wait to see how part 5 follows up with this cliffhanger. Halloween 4 is actually a really good sequel. Sometimes the story doesn't add up, particularly in the first quarter, but Danielle gives an amazing performance. Ellie Cornell is really likeable, Donald Pleasance is a blast, and it does have some genuinely frightening moments throughout. It feels like a classic horror film, and it seems to tick all of the boxes. Halloween 4 seemed to be finally sending the series back on track. I'm still recording. That was Halloween 4. I was just casually checking my phone, transferring money, and then I was like, oh shit, the camera's still up.